welcome to the Hub Live at Climate Week NYC. It's a pleasure to see so many leaders from government, business, civil society, and of course, the philanthropic sector gathering here for our first ever philanthropy. I'm waving at some who've just walked in. First ever climate philanthropy conversation on Climate Week NYC's big stage, and at our largest ever Climate Week NYC to date. The climate philanthropy movement is gaining speed, and at Climate Group, we're so pleased to support this vital movement and see so many other supporters of climate philanthropy in the room with us today. So this session, Bridging the Gap, where and how is philanthropy stepping in on climate, could not be more timely. We're facing, at the moment, economic, political, social uncertainty, and philanthropy is helping keep momentum alive and enable critical solutions. And a special thanks to Benjamin Belagy, Executive Director of Wings, who's co-hosting this session. Wings leadership has been critical in amplifying the role of global philanthropy in climate action. And we're also joined by Jonathan Pershing, Programme Director of Environment at the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation, whose work spans geographies from the US to China, India, Europe, and Latin America. And Jonathan will address the intersection of policy and philanthropy in a shifting global climate landscape, drawing on his experience as both an international negotiator and leader of Hewlett's climate portfolio. After that, we're going to move on to a panel discussion. I'll introduce that as we get to it. And together, all of our speakers will cover how philanthropy can sustain progress, support finance goals, even when political leadership and resource wavers, and translate bold pledges into measurable, real-world outcomes and ensure climate finance reaches local and indigenous actors with justice and equity as core values. Across the world, there are tangible examples of philanthropic commitments powering on and turning into lasting solutions. So thank all of you for joining this important conversation. And with that, I will invite Jonathan to join me on the stage. Oh, I had a microphone on my seat. Is that working? Yeah.
Yes.
Great. Jonathan, good to see you. Thanks for running, or however, did you line bike, whatever we call that in London. Political priorities are shifting in the US, that's an understatement, but shifting in the US and globally. From your vantage point, how is this reshaping the climate agenda?
So anyway, thank you so much, Helen. It's a pleasure to be here. It's always a little dicey to walk in right as someone is beginning a conversation. You kind of think about the traffic outside of New York and you realize that we need to make some fundamental changes.
Yeah.
One of them could be to the traffic. That would be a great outcome. I think there's a couple of things that I would note. And this is really from a perspective of thinking about philanthropy and where philanthropy fits into the larger system. Think about kind of the model in the United States. Philanthropy is basically predicated on the idea of charitable purpose. And what that essentially means is that we as a community are given a tax benefit by providing goods and services and improve the welfare and the lives of people who we support. And that's the exchange for the tax benefit that's provided. So as we think about the agenda that we are all working on, it's specifically the work that we do is geared to making a difference in that dimension. How is it that if we do a better job on climate, it will improve the lives and the welfare of all of the people with whom we work and whom we support? It's fairly clear, right? The short answer is that if we don't have the storms that racked North Carolina, if we avoid the wildfires that are crossing all the way through Australia, if we think about the floods and the droughts in Mumbai, even as recently as last week, that improves welfare. That's an agenda that qualifies as a charitable purpose. So what's changed? What are the things that have shifted over the course of the last 9 months, or maybe over the course of the last decade? There are a few things on each side that I want to highlight. In the last months, we now have a US government which is less attracted to this agenda. But it clearly still values questions about how citizens feel welfare and affordability. There are still real issues that are being debated in our country that speak to the price of energy, that speaks to questions around the inability to afford a house, of the issues about whether your children can manage the welfare that they want and improvements in their lives. Climate at every single turn is going to make that more difficult. And things that we can do to improve that have a near-term benefit. But they have a long-term benefit. It is no question among the scientists of the world about the trajectory we are on. And it's not an arcane debate about the negotiations in Paris and whether it's 1.5 degrees, which is a relatively meaningless number. It's really about what the welfare is to people. What will the food system look like? Will you actually have access to water and air which you can breathe and where you can live comfortably and where the ecosystem on which we all rely is healthy and thriving? There's a very, I think, important quote that I once heard, which is that the economy is a wholly owned subsidiary of the environment. And the idea behind that, to me, is enormously powerful. If we can't sustain a long-term living future, we are lost no matter how wealthy some of our individuals are. And philanthropy, in my mind, is one of the places that speaks to that.
Great. And, you know, your career, as I said before, spans international climate negotiations, including the Paris Agreement. Now you've got one of the largest climate portfolios at Hewlett. What lessons have you learned from your experience, and whether building coalitions or navigating the politics or trying to drive consensus? What's most applicable to philanthropy's role now?
I think there are several things that it's probably worth highlighting for people. One of the things that I think is a misperception about philanthropy, at least as I see it from the seat in which I sit, is that we actually have answers. What we really do is have the power to convene, the power to solicit ideas, the power to be a catalytic provider of some modest level of resource that can open up a new window or a new door to change. If we think about the scale of the problem on climate, we can look at the various assessments that are out there, and some of our partners, some of you probably in this room, have been involved in those analyses. We need about $4 trillion a year. That is not a trivial number under any frame. Philanthropy is measured in the billions, so we're only off by a factor of 1,000. So at the end of the day, the question is, what are we going to do with that lever that we can provide? And that lever is very much about ideas and about coalition building and about the frameworks for bringing communities together and building a vision that we collectively can hold, because when we do that, then you can create change at scale. Then you can create advantages and opportunities. And we have the privilege in our philanthropic community of being able to be catalytic, being able to provide that long lead time idea and open that door for that kind of change.
And do you see philanthropy navigating well to this shift, or where's philanthropy being effective in stepping in?
I think philanthropy, like all of us, is struggling.
Yeah.
I don't think any of us have figured out exactly where to go. None of us have got the crystal ball which says, if you take this path, if you make this investment, you'll be in a good place. Instead, what we're doing is we're doing a collective endeavor to find out how we might do that. And my guess is that every single person in this room has got something to contribute and is already contributing. So in my view, the job of philanthropy is to be a listener. The job is to think about, where do you come together? What ideas do you have? There are a number that I'm seeing that feel very positive at this moment. So at one end, it's the mere gathering together to indicate that this is not a moment of the loss of confidence. This is a moment of commitment at a collective level. I know, Helen, that you've got more people signed up for this year's session than any previous New York week. And what's amazing is that you're now part of a coalition of climate weeks around the world. Yeah. The number of people who went to London, the number of people who went to Addis, the number of people who are proposing to go to Maharashtra next year. We now have a global community that is showing up. And that has to be the very most salient, significant piece. The second thing is that we need the thinking, because this is a leverage exercise. We're trying to change an enormously complicated problem with a few key investments. The Archimedes model, if you had a lever long enough, you could move the world. You need the fulcrum in the right spot. You're the fulcrum. We have a little bit of capital, and collectively we can create the change. We need government. There's no question about government's need to be playing. We need the private capital that's going to be part of the solution. We need to have other voices in civil society at every level. We need to have the advocates and those who draw narratives and people who build community. Those are the collective sets of actors that will change the outcome. We're coordinators. We're facilitators. We're in a position of enormous responsibility to try to generate that change at scale.
Great. I've been thinking a lot the last day, well, since it feels like I've been here a month, but it's since yesterday, that there's sort of different clocks running at different paces, you know, and we know that climate is a long-term issue, it's a long-term thing. I think it's easy then to say, well, you know, these political cycles are short, but we've got to do all this immediate action now. How are you sort of thinking about those timescales? And particularly, you know, corporates find it very hard to think in that long term, but there ought to be space for philanthropy. So when everything is so volatile and moving so quickly, how are you sort of thinking about immediate needs and things we have to do now versus those kind of durable long-term strategies?
So we actually just came from a meeting, Helen and I were just at a meeting in which we were discussing this. And one of the things that I found fascinating about that conversation was the idea that it's not one or the other,
right.
It's both and. So let's break it out and think about the things you want to do today, the things you can wait to do tomorrow but are significant. You might have to start on them today if you're going to make the outcome, and the things that have longer term frames. What do you need to do today? Today, if we're not beginning to create commitments and beginning to build the kind of policy environment, the long term won't work. So you have to have transitions on the ground. You have to start making investments. If you think about a company that's in the power sector game, and you think about a model in which it proposes to build significant new zero carbon options, if it's not starting today, it won't have that installed for a decade. If you think about the supply chain that might provide it, where the critical minerals will come from, where the workforce and the training will come from, if you're not starting that today, they won't be ready in the 10 years when you need them. So you have to start today, even as a longer term. But there's a second set of things, because this is not a problem that will be fixed in 5 years. This is a problem which is going to be an ongoing question of both maintaining the pressure on the system and continuing to reduce emissions. The trajectory that we would like to be on is to be a more or less net zero by mid-century. That's 25 years. We don't even know all the pieces that we'll have to build over that time. We're not quite sure what the economic development will be that will provide improved welfare so that all of our citizens are better off, not just because we've avoided climate, but because the actions we have taken improve the quality of their lives. We don't know how to do all of that. We know the first steps, but we have to plan for the longer term. We need the research. We need the policy analysis. We need to build the next cohort among our youth who will become the leaders in 2050 who will drive this forward. So from our perspective, certainly at Hewlett, we are seeking to work in all of the dimensions of that time frame.
That's fantastic. Jonathan, I would love to keep talking all day. That's telling us we've got to stop. So thank you. Please join me in thanking Jonathan.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. We're now going to hand over to the panel, and Alice will take us through the panel. So Alice de Moraes Amoram Bogas is Programme Director of the COP30 Presidency, where she brings unique expertise from both philanthropy and government to drive bold climate action. And having led the Climate Policy and Engagement team at ICS, I'm sorry, I'm not wearing my glasses, so I'm not doing this brilliant justice, the global #Philanthropy for Climate movement, and now shaping COP30 from within Brazil's presidency team, she offers a great perspective on how collaboration across these worlds can accelerate change. And I'm quickly going to introduce our panel. So we're delighted to have a panel who's going to bring us representation across regions, including innovative perspectives from Asian philanthropy, led by Sean Seol, CEO of Philanthropy Asia Alliance, Latin American philanthropy, represented by Sigrid Vasconez, Executive Director of Fonde NECA. Thank you. And thrilled to welcome Helen Mountford, President and CEO of Climate Works Foundation, who brings years of experience at the intersection of climate action and economic development, and Benjamin Balaji, Wings Executive Director and co-host of this session. So with that fully introduced panel, I'll hand over to Alice. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Helen. Please come and join me. I don't know if we have enough seats, but if you can bring one more, maybe. I can sit here. I can stand. You can go stay there. That's fine. Good afternoon to all of you. It's a pleasure to be here, and as Helen mentioned, my name is Alice. I'm with the COP30 presidency team, and I have been running around this city for this past few days, but I wanted to make sure we are here. I was here because I do come from philanthropy, and I have been working in philanthropy for the past 10 years. So I believe that there is a big role that philanthropy can play in tackling the climate crisis, but making it much more meaningful, the way we do grant making, the way we support policies, the way we support the biggest transformation that we need to see in the world that Jonathan so well described. From the COP30 presidency perspective, we are striving to get 3 main objectives out of this COP, and I want to actually connect this with the conversation that we're going to have here, because in the end of the day, the contribution of philanthropy should be somehow aligned with what we want to achieve, right? The 3 main objectives that we are working on are, first, we need to strengthen and protect multilateralism. So one of the key elements on how the networks, Wings, and Asia Philanthropy it has been working on is to strengthen this ecosystem to also deliver a stronger multilateral system. The second is to accelerate implementation of action. So for those who have been following COPs for the past 10 years or more, we know that we have been focusing a lot on the negotiations, but now we need to speed up and accelerate implementation. And the question is, what is philanthropy doing to help that, and what can we do more? And the third objective is to actually get climate closer to people's lives, people's realities. That's what Jonathan also mentioned. And as of now, we are seeing that this is happening through impacts. This is also happening through mitigation actions. But this is not necessarily happening through political power and action. So we do need to leverage much better the way we communicate that. But to do that, I think we need to understand from our panelists where we are, what's happening actually. And this is why I wanted to start with Helen. One quick question before. If you can stand up, hands are raised if you work for philanthropy and you are in the city. Okay, so maybe more or less half of the people here understands the philanthropy ecosystem, but maybe people don't understand so much what is the role of ClimateWorks in that space and how important it is to the data, the research, and the intelligence units that ClimateWorks does. So, Helen, from the data that you have been collecting, the work that ClimateWorks has been doing, where do you see that philanthropies are progressing, and where do you see that we can improve more?
Thanks very much, Elise, and really wonderful to be here. Thank you so much for hosting this, Helen and Ben, to have us all here today. It is a critical moment, and we're very keen, as Jonathan said, to see how we in philanthropy can help step up to really help advance action in a way that's good for people, good for welfare. ClimateWorks is a little bit of a unique organization. We were really set up to help all of philanthropy do more and better targeted and more collaboratively on climate. So we're here to help support the philanthropic networks, and we do a lot of data and research, including tracking what is happening in climate philanthropy, where are funds going in terms of geographies, sectors, in terms of different strategies, but also doing sort of research and innovation on innovation, trying different approaches, seeing what works and what doesn't. We also do a lot of convening of philanthropy, and as Jonathan mentioned, this is a core element of how we move forward. How do we bring different actors together, co-create some of the strategies of what would actually work, and then put them in place. So on the data, one of the things that there was a lot of nervousness about in the last 6 to 9 months was what was going to happen in terms of climate philanthropy. Were people going to back away from climate? Were we going to reduce funding? We, from the data that we have, first of all from 2024, it looks very likely that we're going to pass $5 billion in climate philanthropy from foundations for the first time ever. So in 2024, there is a notable uptick. And what we're hearing from the major foundations that we speak to is people are not backing away this year. They're continuing to invest in climate because it is good for people, good for the economy, good for growth and development. So we're actually seeing a lot of momentum forward. In the past, we have had a big focus on climate in terms of philanthropy, on climate action in the US and in Europe in particular. I'd say about 60% of country or regional funding, related funding, has gone to those two regions, Europe and the US. Much much less to Africa, much less to Latin America, Southeast Asia. That is shifting. And partly that's shifting because we are seeing leadership in those regions really standing up and moving forward, and opportunities to invest the sort of small catalytic funding from philanthropy, which can help them to move. So those are some of the areas I'm seeing some of the shifts. The good news, the money is there. People are continuing to invest in climate action and also doing it differently in different places.
Great, thanks, Helen. So it's encouraging to see that. And actually, this trend on climate philanthropy has to be read as well as part of the bigger, wider, actually, aid landscape and ecosystem. And there is a question that's a lot going on as well there in terms of how this is diminishing and how is philanthropy stepping in as well. So I wanted to bring in you, Benjamin, please. First, to say quickly what is Wings and what Wings does, but also explain us how is the philanthropic sector responding to the shift in aid landscape, and where do you see the power of networks there?
Great, thank you, Alice. Excited to be here and with this session, and grateful also to the Climate Group and Helen for having us. So Wings is the main global philanthropic network that gathers a very important diversity of players who are building the field, the philanthropy and giving sector around the world. So it's a bit of a network of networks and other ecosystems builders for philanthropy. And we're usually not thematically organized. We are about growing the pie of private resources for the common good and making these resources more impactful, more transformative. But the reason we decided to engage on climate a few years ago with our community of 250 members in 60 countries who represent and serve 100,000 foundations around the world is that we really understood that the climate crisis was impacting all aspects of the philanthropic sector, and that it had become a sectoral issue and not a thematic issue for philanthropy. And so we've really helped nurture this movement called Philanthropy for Climate, which is about trying to get non-environmental funders, non-climate actors in particular, to understand the overlap with their issues, which Jonathan mentioned, with economy, with inequality, with health, et cetera, et cetera. And so trying to elevate this overlap and help them be equipped to act and to integrate that climate lens through their work. So we have a pledge with a number of philanthropic networks in different parts of the world that are engaging their own constituencies. And so that's a really interesting example of how we can come together at the global level with the diversity of players that we have, and really have a common vision and a common pathway to act, and also spaces to learn. It's really important for philanthropies to learn on this journey, because it's obviously there's a big learning curve, especially for those who are new to the topic. And so we have now 900 plus foundations around the world that have signed this commitment, and we see that they really increase their giving to the climate cause. They also raise their awareness, the awareness of their staff, of their board on the issue. So that's a really positive outcome for us, and we want to do more. But we're aware that this is just, it's just an element. We need much more in the philanthropic sector now to grow investments and to really create that global mobilization. And so, to your question, and I'll try to be quick, because it's a very big question, like how we can leverage these limited resources from philanthropy in the best way, including in the context of global aid cuts, and with this climate agenda politically becoming less prominent in different parts of the world. And so how do we compensate for that? There are, of course, no easy answers, but at Wings, we've really listened to our constituencies and foundations around the world, and we came up with a call to action, inviting foundations and philanthropies to do a few things in this context. And one of them is, of course, to be, to offer flexibility to their partners, to be, in listening mode, to be less restrictive, and so on and so forth, a bit on the how of philanthropy. But there's a big chunk of the recommendations around the importance to build ecosystems. And to have that multiplier effect. So that means instead of just focusing our, $1 million on delivering a certain outcome, delivering certain services, that a part of this investment goes to building coalitions, to helping build the pipes, the infrastructure, the networks, the coalitions, the data, and everything that is needed to really accelerate the collective impact and unlock the collective impact of these resources. So, and that's something that we still see not really happening. So in the climate space, a little more than other spaces, so with organizations like Climate Works and others that have really helped, but we need much more, and that's one of the key ways we can help our limited resources have more impact. And also one of the key elements in that is the need for more bridges between philanthropy, government, business, civil society. And so again, that takes an infrastructure. It takes coordination spaces, it takes multi-stakeholder partnership mechanisms, and we just need to invest much more intentionally in these. And that's one of the ideas that we're promoting with this call to action.
Thank you so much, Benjamin. I think from the action agenda at COPS, what we can tell you is that we mapped over 600 initiatives already exist in different topics, and philanthropy is involved in most of them. The challenge that we are facing now is that sometimes there are some overlaps, and we need to make the bridges and actually make it more effective as an ecosystem. But I think to your point, the ecosystem that backs up is very critical, and we know that. Going to Asia. So Sean, welcome. And I would love to hear more about Philanthropy Asia Alliance. I don't know if lots of people do. I haven't heard about it. But there is what we see, and the COP president has been walking around Singapore, India, Australia, China, and there is a lot of enthusiasm coming from Asia in terms of what's happening in action in the mitigation and also on the adaptation front. Tell us a bit more, please. What have you been seeing and working on that helps foster those partnerships with governments, philanthropies, on the climate space?
Thank you, thank you. I'll just talk a little bit about what PAA does. It's the acronym for Philanthropy Asia Alliance. You've done the job of describing what we are, Ben. We are very similar. 2 years old, funded by Temasek, which is an investment firm, a global investment firm. What we do is really to line up like-minded partners, philanthropists, to really want to do collaborative philanthropy in Asia. We think that we know Asia faces a lot of challenges, but a lot of solutions are coming out of Asia as well, especially given the innovative tracks and the AI and the emphasis on blended finance in Asia. So that's what we think we can be relevant in the space of climate, health, and education, climate writ large. It's very important to all that we do. So we've got quite a lot of members from Gates. He launched a health community, pledging $100 million to look at infectious diseases in Asia. We've got Novo Nordisk. We've got a bunch of climate funders as well, Sequoia, Climate Works. And in Asia, I think the beauty of what we do is really to try and bring the Asians and the Western philanthropists together. There's a lot of learning because I think Western philanthropists is the way you set up your taxation and your regulations. I think you're ahead of what the Asians are doing, but the Asians are very embedded locally. And the nuances of the Asian cultures and religions, that's super, super helpful to any Western philanthropist trying to deploy capital in Asia. So we hope to be useful. What I'm observing in Asia, definitely, Asia is all about the climate. It's the climate decade for Asia. There's no running away from it. There's a typhoon in Hong Kong right now, and it's really the result of all that we're doing to the environment and Mother Earth. But a lot of Asian communities are very vulnerable to the coast, what happens in flooding. And, well, I was given a statistic that said 90 of the 100 cities that are vulnerable in the world are in Asia. 90% of unfortunately, of the new coal plants being planned are in Asia as well. So it is a place where the risks are large. It's also a place where innovation and the solutions will be global in nature. Think of blended finance in scaling projects. Think of the investments that we need in adaptation, in renewables. China and India are leading the way, truth be told. And there's so much out that's happening there in Asia. You've got more billionaires there than anywhere else in the world. So we're really trying to tap on that wealth, generational transfer of wealth, the way in which they're thinking about new ways to do it. So that these are trends that are emerging in Asia. And I encourage all of you to come to Asia's summit. We convene a Philanthropy Asia Summit every May. We're welcome to you to see what's out there, get under the hood of that.
Fantastic. Looking forward to it. And it's interesting when you work on philanthropy that you think, oh, it's a homogeneous sector. It's not a homogeneous sector at all. So it's very difficult to understand from outside what are the features of different regions. And I think, well, WINGS is a good knowledge source for that. But going to Latin America, because it is a region that has a tradition of philanthropy, but not necessarily on climate philanthropy. At the same time, is at the forefront. I mean, it has hosted the CDB, so there was a lot in the biodiversity space and indigenous communities there, now hosting the COP. What's happening in Latin America? And can you tell us a bit more about Fundo Iñeque, Sigrid, please?
Thank you. First, thank you for having me here. And it's a wonderful conversation to see about the ecosystem of philanthropy. And here I come. Iñeque is part of the Global Alliance of the Global South Alliance for Socio-Environmental Funds. So we are an alliance that looks at community philanthropy and trust-based philanthropy. And we take the funds towards the communities directly. And that's the question that we always ask, how is the funding really reaching the communities? We have set up this alliance since 2020 to fill in the gap. We started with 10 organizations, now we have 16. And in the past 5 years, we have already disbursed over $90 million to the hands of the local communities. And this is very important in regions like Latin America, where, as you said, we don't have much about philanthropy in the private sector. So we look for this mechanism as a way to start building philanthropy ecosystem with the private sector, and also to respond really critically to the communities that are at the front lines. And how do we do it? Because the question is, how are we stepping up for climate change? And for example, we have flexible and adaptable mechanisms, very flexible, that usually philanthropy is difficult to navigate for communities that we fund the unfundable communities, usually the ones that are not near the channels and the possibilities to get funding. So we listen to the communities and we support them. For example, for rapid response, last year we had, as you probably know, in the Amazon, across Brazil, across Bolivia, also in Ecuador, where Iñeque is, we funded fire squads organized by the communities, directly funding them to be trained to fight the fires that devastated the region. And that capacity that we have to percolate, to go there and to really respond is critical in this moment where the crisis is fast, is moving, and it requires rapid response. And we also, just another example to do that, I think, we discuss about catalytic, to be catalyzers. And we always think about, it's not like the communities do not have resources. We don't want to replace the resources the community have. We want to catalyze and trigger what the resources are there. So for example, we are supporting a lot of the networks, community networks. In Ecuador, for example, we're working with women-led alliances, community-led alliances that work on water issues, which are starting to be more and more important. And just to give you an example of that, for community, there's a need, and it's a niche that we need to look into more.
Thank you so much, Sigrid. I think now we got a bit of a sense of different organizations and places. Now we're going to land to examples, because I think one of the features and the challenges of working in philanthropy is sometimes everything sounds very theoretical, and what exactly do you do? How can you actually be part of the solution? And one of the key elements that we are seeing at the COP, but also everywhere in the world we see, is that we need to work on adaptation and resilience building, because this is good for public budgets, this is good for business, this is good for the communities. But what is the response from philanthropies on that? So Helen, I know that you have been working on that. Can you give an example of what ClimateWorks and other philanthropies are doing?
Absolutely happy to. We still do a lot of work that is on how do we bring down the emissions, because we will not tackle the climate challenge unless we do that in a much more accelerated way. And we're also doing a lot now on adaptation and resilience. The climate impacts are here. People are being affected day to day around the world. We're all seeing it. We're all feeling it. And the most vulnerable communities the most. We in Philanthropy started a group, an adaptation and resilience collaborative of funders a couple of years ago, 2 years ago. And initially it was very small, and we sort of thought there'd be about 3 or 4 around the room. We now have 70 foundations that are participating, and not just from climate, but also from development philanthropy, agriculture philanthropy, other parts, all coming together saying, how can we work together in ways that we can achieve our collective goals much quicker, bring more money in from our partnership than what we would otherwise have. And some of these, let me just give an example from this. I mean, one of the things that we did was last month managed to come together and launch a pooled fund of $50 million for adaptation and resilience, with a strong focus on how to tackle extreme heat, particularly in urban environments. That was a partnership with Quadrature and Rockefeller and Loudis and Howden Foundation. As part of some of that work, one of the things we've been doing is supporting India on their ambition to really move forward on solutions to cooling that get access to everyone at affordable prices. The heat extremes and the impacts in India are enormous, as well as the floods that Jonathan was mentioning before, but the heat extremes are really devastating. And so one of the things we did is used a little bit of catalytic capital from Philanthropy, partnered with the Indian government and a group called EESL, Energy Efficiency Services Limited. They aggregate demand for clean energy and efficient energy solutions. And there is a fan which can actually, a fan that's 40% more efficient that can be used than the standard fan in India, but it costs a bit more. So the idea was, how do we aggregate demand for that? How can we actually get more of these much more energy efficient fans going, which first of all will lead to lower electricity prices month after month for the users, but also bring down a lot of the emissions related with cooling. And as they started aggregating demand, bringing it together, we found we got demand 3 times more than what was expected. And as a result of doing this in bulk, the prices came down by about 30%. Once the prices came down by 30%, they became cost competitive with the standard model. So much less emissions, much cheaper for Indian households to run, Indian businesses to run, much better in terms of reducing the peak demand on the electricity system, which we know leads to blackouts often during extreme heat events. And it was at a price comparison point with the standard one. So that's a way that like a small bit of catalytic capital can help to move this forward in much quicker ways.
Excellent. So this is what we are hearing from mayors. This is what we are hearing from health ministries. That's something we need to tackle on. But philanthropy can also step in with complementary approaches. And then Benjamin, I think one of the key challenges in philanthropy is how to avoid duplication, how to create structures that actually help organizing the space. What is your take in one concrete example, if you can give, on how to do that?
Yes, indeed. The sector has, historically been used to working alone in a way that is centered around, a foundation's objectives and theory of change, and with occasional collaboration, but not very rarely like integrated collective strategies. And we believe that the need is to, of course, evolve in the practices, the policies of foundations, but we also need to build, again, the structures for that collective action to happen. So one example is well, as we prepare for COP, we just thought like, what could be a useful contribution of a network like Wings ahead of COP? And we just felt like we needed to elevate the importance of the ecosystem if we wanted to accelerate climate philanthropy in the Amazon or the Pan-Amazon region. And of course, there are existing sources of data on like how much philanthropic money goes to climate in this region and other pieces of information. But rarely have we had like an actual conversation and engagement process to talk about the infrastructure for philanthropy to thrive. And so we've started a process of participatory mapping and strengthening initiative for the ecosystem, where we gather groups like Alianza del Fundos del Sur or Climate Works and Amazon Funders Coalition, and trying to understand who is doing what to support climate philanthropy in the region, and then identify synergies, who could work together, and then what are the gaps, what do we need to create that could help attract more funding, help this funding be more impactful, reach really the grassroots and the community level without reinventing the wheel, without duplicating existing infrastructures, and building from the ground up on what is there, because there are plenty of wonderful actors on the ground. So we will present at COP the outcomes of this roadmap, and we'll try to engage funders to invest in ecosystems, not just in actual, again, service delivery and projects, but actually help build the collective power of philanthropy. So that's one of the ways that we can help, of course, like reduce duplication, but also have like that multiplier effect in growing the pie of resources and making them more impactful. So that's one of the ways. And you know, we really think that the sector needs to invest much more into this, and one of the things we need to do is to have more concrete examples and pilots that we can share. So it's a bit of a call to all of us to share with each other the models so we can help replicate them and have more conversations on this infrastructure layer is a key.
Fantastic, thank you. Sean, one example that you could share from one of your members that you think you would be proud of, showing that this is the blueprint of what your members are doing to tackle the climate crisis.
Okay, I'm going to piss off a lot of members not in the room. I'll just think of one here in the interest of time. This is a WIP project. It's about rice. I think Asians eat a lot of rice. You may eat it in your sushi as well out in the US. What's happened is that Philanthropy actually funded their trials, are funding the trials right now in India, Laos, and Indonesia, where the rice, the way in which it's grown, will actually be a lot friendlier, 30% less methane to the environment and climate-resistant crops and all that. But what's interesting is beyond the trials, once the science has been proven, what we want to do is really to take it to adoption. And that's really where we bring in the off-takers. It could be governments, it could be private sector, and to one day you could actually buy in Costco's. And that's really the proof of what we're trying to do to scale the solution and really to make sure that at the end of the day, it goes beyond the science into action.
Excellent, very concrete. We are timing getting very concrete on the climate space, so thank you so much for that. Sigrid, you mentioned on the fire management, which is a big topic. It's actually happening as well in the action agenda. There's a lot going on finding ways in which more effectively we can do that. Want to share other examples from the network, the funds?
Well, I think it's the experience that we have with the fire squads. It's something that it's amplified also to other issues, floods, for example, that we are having this regime change in the Amazon. But the critical examples, or the way that we're working with the Alliance, is that we look at the ecosystem base, the whole Amazon biome, and not beyond countries, And so these brigades are having a lot of exchange, community exchange, and knowledge transfers through a peer-to-peer exchange. Not like we will teach them, but they teach each other, And I think those are concrete examples of how we can really catalyze what the communities already have, because the communities have resources. And that's something that we always have to remember, is that funding or philanthropy comes to kind of trigger more and to elevate and to empower. And I think we have tons of other examples, but for the sake of time, I'm there.
No, thank you so much. I think with that, we conclude this part. I think it's clear that philanthropy has something that many governments would love to have and we can't have, which is the capacity to experiment and actually learn from that experiment, have time to digest this experiment. This is an asset that is very valuable, very important nowadays. And this is something that I hope we're going to see philanthropies at COP30, COP31, but actually on a day-to-day basis, working more collectively, but to be precise and specific. We need to be fast and we need to be effective collectively as much as we can. Helen, I pass it over to you for our closing, please. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you very much. Thanks to all our panelists, to Jonathan for your insights. I think you can tell what an important conversation this is by the fact that we've got standing room only here. So I just really want to thank everyone for joining this. We're going to continue this conversation. The next thing that you can do is go to lunch. But before we do that, I thought if we could thank our panelists with the kind of volume of whooping that we've been hearing from next door and sort of show them that like this is where it's at, that would be great. So please join me.